one trip, and I've been out there 20-some times, but was because the time was not right. That is the only thing that made any difference. But we have told the Turkish authorities what we wanted to do and why we wanted to do it, and we have done exactly what we said, and we have given them copies of everything. And also, we have never made any claim of any kind that was not true. And they have asked us to refrain from saying certain things, and we have not said them. Simply because they wouldn't do any good anyway. And if somebody did say them, it'd just make them, it would embarrass the government, and I'd be out of there on my ear. And other people have not extended this courtesy to the Turkish authorities. They badmouth them and that sort of thing. Now, I explained this last night, but I'll explain it one more time. There are people that raise large sums of money, have folks lined up to come see the Ark. They go over and try to get the permit. They go over there, they tell some people, journalists, that some of their people are with the CIA, and of course the journalists go print it, and these people don't get a permit. Well, that makes them happy because they don't have to pay the other people's way over there. They put all that money in their pocket. So this kind of thing has been going on. Another person that I took out there in 1984 called a news conference, showed 2 pieces of wood, and said he found Noah's Ark. Failed to mention that it was at the end of my pointing finger when I said, there it is. And he had these 2 pieces of wood that he said came off the Ark. Well, they didn't come off the Ark. Well, later on, he was quite a wheeler dealer. He got a bunch of people that were going to put up millions of dollars to build hotels and do all kinds of things. And the Turks, that sounded good to them. And they said, why don't all of you Americans get together? And, we'll put some Turkish guys in there and we'll get this thing done. I said, well, I'm very sorry, but I can't work with this guy. They said, why? I said, well, you read the newspaper interview with him from 1984, August the 24th. And they said, what's that? I said, he had 2 pieces of wood that he got from somewhere else, and he said they came off the Noah's Ark. I said, if that guy is allowed back on the boat, I'm not going back on the boat, because nobody is going to believe anything you find out there after that kind of a false claim. And I said, I know the fellow from times past, he will not build a hotel. He'll raise a lot of money, but it'll end up in his bank account. But I said, that's up to you folks. You do what you think best. So anyway, the bottom line is that at this point in time, I get along very well with those people, and they're not stupid people, and they're not dishonest people, no more so than anybody else. And so, with the Lord's help, this thing will be proven beyond reasonable doubt. In fact, it's already been done. But some excavation won't hurt. Now, let's see. I think I saw a hand here, and then I'll
follow up on that. The Turkish government itself has no interest in doing this themselves.
Well, they have no money, is their problem. They did build a very nice visitor center. In fact, we were able to eat in air-conditioned comfort. Okay. At a place where when I first went out there, I was humping it up the hill with all of my gear. And you can ride up there in an air-conditioned bus or taxi, and it is fantastic. You can sit right there and eat or drink a cold drink or whatever and look at the Ark. And you can carry your field glasses along, and see the timbers. It is fantastic. I tell you, I am just thrilled to death that God has done that and made things so much nicer than it was before. Okay, sir.
I was wondering, what do you do with that when you get it out, you excavate it? Where do you take it, and what do you do with it?
Well, we have presented a plan to the Turkish government, and that includes housing it right where it is with a replica of what it looked like before, it fell apart out there and petrified, and a glassed inside so that people coming to the area can see it. I hate things that get put in a box that you can never see except right up at the end of your nose, because you can't get much of an overview, you know, if you're inside a building with something, a large object. So they have approved this, and we now have some money, and hopefully we'll be able to excavate enough that it will prove the point, and then I believe we can raise enough money to complete it. Now, what I'm hoping is that Christ will come tomorrow. I'm not predicting that he will. In fact, I doubt it seriously. But in other words, I've got no big burden to excavate Noah's Ark. I don't do this just for fun or something to do. It's to, you know, share the gospel of Christ, to get people's attention so they'll listen to the gospel of Christ. And that's all that's important to me personally. But if time lasts long enough, then since we have begun this thing, we should finish it.
Just before I left my church today, I had one of the members show me the latest Review and Herald that made a statement in there that we will not find the ark until after probation closes.
Well, there are some good-intentioned people that believe that way. And, hey, the Lord bless them. I am of an opposite opinion simply because, shall we say, I have had divine help in finding it, and we are proceeding with the plans to get it out. I am persuaded that the Ark of the Covenant will probably never be brought out. I believe the video of it and real careful documentation will. But I don't think God is going to expose that, you know, to what will happen here at the end of the Earth's history. I think he will, you know, continue to preserve it. But there are statements, what these people are looking at are statements about the Ark of the Covenant and the tables of stone that are in heaven. And what you need to do is carefully check. You will find that God wrote the law on one set of tables of stone with his finger in heaven. And it says this very plainly. And the other one he wrote with his finger on Mount Sinai. So there's two sets around. And both of these sets will be presented to humanity before everything is done. One of them will be on that great white throne of judgment, and also it will appear in the clouds just before Christ's coming and the wicked are struck dead. It'll be in the, you know, the heavens will be rolled back, and there will be the Ten Commandments. Yes. Okay. Yes, sir.
The wooden portion of the ark, is all of that petrified, decomposed? Is any of it still there? Or will it out?
Now, you're talking about the Ark of the Covenant?
No, the
Noah's Ark. Okay. There's all kinds of remains. There are some places where the timber has totally dry rotted out and there's a hole, but the hole is the shape of the timber because what it was in is still in shape, intact. There we'll have to pour plaster of Paris or something to fill that in and solidify so that can be preserved. Some of it is petrified. Some of it is partly decayed, partly petrified. And the iron brackets that are all over the boat, some of them are oxidized away pretty much. Some of them you can see very clearly are iron brackets. And so it's just a hodgepodge of, it covers a very large area. And so where there was not enough water in some areas to petrify it, it has just totally decayed, and the only way you can tell the difference between it and the matrix, or what's covering it, is the density and the color. So, you know, it's shall we say, going to take a very careful excavation to preserve what's out there. And we, of course, consult with specialists in those areas. I do not go out there and try to do something that I don't know how to do. If I can't find a specialist that knows how to do something, then I pray and ask God to help me find a specialist or a book that describes it or enlighten me or something. Okay, I believe that man had his hand up the longest.
First of all, I've got three things I want to say.
Yours was up the longest. No, go ahead. Three things, okay.
Yeah, I first wanted to make a testimony on your film. We showed it to our 7th and 8th grade last year. And after we showed it, the one on Noah's Ark that we saw last night. And it had a profound impression upon our young people. And I remember one girl saying, she said, I believe the Lord is coming soon. That was the impression that it made upon her.
I appreciate you saying that.
The second thing I wanted to, last night you mentioned about you were putting out a book that we could purchase.
Yep.
And I was not able to get in on what we were supposed to do in order to get this material. And thirdly, you mentioned last night after the meeting about purporting to have found possibly Noah's wife's tomb. Would you elaborate on that further?
Okay. Not too far distant from the Ark, there was a very thick-walled house, a very unique design, okay? The windows were like you have never seen windows, and I have never seen windows. They are flush with the outside of the building and they're square, but once you get in, they slope back towards the corners so that what little light there is outside will lighten up the whole inside of the house. I've never seen anything like that before. I've seen some modified, I've seen some the other way around, where they're straight inside and sloped on the outside. I guess that would help with the lighting situation too, to some extent. But anyway, in the front yard of that were two tombstones, or markers, obelisks, and they had 8 crosses on there, which of course were Christian, Byzantine. And on the bottom part of it, it had an inscription that showed 8 people walking away from a boat on a wave, and it showed the second largest one, and you have to know about hieroglyphics. The people are represented by their importance, by size relationships. You can follow me. Moses was, Noah was the biggest, his wife was next, the sons were next, and the wives were last. And it showed this second person with their face down and their eyes closed, and in hieroglyphics that means death. Okay, so what it really said was that she died today. But they dug this up and found her skeleton and a bunch of jewels, gold and jewels, that got them well over $100 million. And that was my fault, because I sketched that thing, put it in a little booklet, and shared the booklet. And this fellow that I just described to you a minute ago, that had the 2 pieces of wood, he paid a villager $400 American to dig that up for him. And he's off somewhere rich, having a good time, and I don't have money to do stuff with. So as to who is the smartest, you can draw your own conclusions.
You said something about a job on this town?
Yeah, it's in the hotel over there, and Bob has a picture of it. There's 2 of them. Now there's inscriptions around there. There's pierced anchor stones with iconographic inscriptions on them and other inscriptions. The Turkish villagers follow you around, and their only hope of striking it rich is finding some artifact that they can sell for a fortune. You see, they don't have the good old American enterprise possibilities that we have, so I guarantee you they keep their eyes peeled. And there was a graveyard over there that had 300 grave markers. Every one of them had 8 crosses on them. But now there's a bunch of busted rocks, because they found out that tourists like to buy stones with crosses on them. And so, you know, it's sad that this is happening, but it's all a part of it's been the result of our work. Because whatever you show interest in, they know that somebody will buy it. Okay.
This gentleman's information, I think it was our grandson that's a doctor in Indiana that sent that film by Noah's Ark. He said that we better send it back soon. I loaned him somebody to show it to Captain. I was just going to say, a very few years or so ago, I had heard a doctor's testimony that speaking about the Ark of the Covenant. There's a chapter in the Prophets and Kings, I believe it is, that gives some inference or indication that maybe the Ark of the Covenant would be found. And he said, most seemingly, from a human standpoint, the most opportune time when Satan stands up on this earth and the side of some men and said he would change the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday. It would be a good time then for the Ark to be found.
That's right. God does everything in perfect timing, and I will stake my life on the fact that at least the tables of stone will be presented to the world before probation closes. Now, something that you and I need to be aware of, that since we are in the position that we are in and we have access to the truth, our probation will be closed before a lot of other people will. And so we need to be aware of that. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
When you open that to find the ark, would you dare touch it?
Yes, with reverence and respect.
I just wondered because the priests didn't even touch it.
Right.
They had poles.
Yep. That's correct. If the tables of stone are to be presented, then somebody has to touch it, or an angel can get it out and do it. And I would much prefer the angel did it. But if they don't, I'll try it. Yes. I may get zapped, but if I do,
Better get permission first.
then I will know that I shouldn't have touched it. Yes.
I guess you could ask my question because
okay.
in a schoolroom, that was a very important lesson. But the children found it a little difficult to understand why God put such restriction on that when it appeared that those who were bearing it were doing it
In a special manner.
in a special manner
Yes.
to keep it from falling. So the question they would ask would be, how can someone now touch it?
Yeah.
I think you answered that. But I did want to ask you, if you know of Elder Crawford, who was a part of the was he with the 60s group, or was he with your
He was with the 72 group and not with my group at all. What I have done is I have gone out, and when I needed somebody who was a specialist in geology, I took one out. When I needed somebody that was a specialist in electronics, I took one out. And so this is how we have proceeded, simply because one has to convince the Turkish government that this is reality. I mean, you can't, something this important, especially where there is so many stories about people seeing it going around, we had to document it much more thoroughly than we would have had nobody made up all these stories. And sad to say, these are just stories. That Russian pilot was a figment of a journalist's imagination. He made the name up, he made the story up and the whole thing, and he has sent everybody that has appeared in the newspaper in regards to Noah's Ark. He sent them a letter apologizing for having done that and asking for their forgiveness. So all these stories are just made up.
Would you elaborate on what you shared with me? And she's asking the same question that I asked at noon. It seems as though because I knew you took pictures, tunneled in and took pictures there, it seems as though people have the idea that you touched the Ark of the Covenant. Would you?
No, I haven't. Okay, yeah, thanks. Well, what I did, and if I don't keep these things short, I'll just be speechless here shortly. If somebody would give me a cup of water, I'd sure be grateful. I hate to cause any problems, but what I did, I found the chamber, and what they had moved, this is a 22-foot by 12-foot chamber, and one end is narrower than 12 foot, but I couldn't get back to measure it, so I don't know. I can only say that it's about 8 feet wide back there. But the whole thing has stuff in it. They put animal skins over directly on top of the material. Then they put wood, boards of wood, and then they packed it with rocks. Now, I don't know why they did that, but that's what they did. Now, over the years, the seismic activity, and I suppose when Christ died, that was right above it, so there's some shaking. This stuff got shook down about 18 inches of things. Pastor Calloway. I have to think, or I'll be calling him oral. It may not be appropriate, but anyway, thank you. So, I had a little Arab guy that could get in places that I couldn't even begin to get in. And he would go in, with and I'd give him a light and ask him to dig or, whatever. And so that whole Calvary escarpment is full of chambers and tunnels and all that. Anybody that's a spelunker would go nuts in there. But you better take a string along with you because it's really amazing. But anyway, he'd been in and out of real tight places for about a month. And when we got to this place and he went in, he turned around. Just the second he got in, I was going to hand him a light, and he was terrified. His eyes were just totally incoherent. I mean, he was terrified, and he just ripped out of there. I'm sorry. I'll take that as a hint. Thank you, Bill. And he said, what's in there? What's in there? I'm not going back in. Well, this was out of character of this fellow, because he was fearless. But then he was absolutely terrified, and I knew that the only thing that would do that to him was supernatural terror. I've experienced that a time or two myself, and I recognized it in him. And so anyway, if it hadn't been for that, I would have just gone on, or let him, look around, and we would probably have not spent any time in that chamber. But since that happened, I busted a big enough hole that I could get in. I went in and took my flashlight and looked down through the cracks in the box, and I saw 3 spots where the gold reflected back. So I moved the stones and stuck them everywhere I could. By the time I got the top of a gold table cleared off, I had rocks behind my shoulders that I was leaning back against, and I got a decent picture of the table. Not real good, but decent. But anyway, after I did this, I looked, and here was this flat stone right in front of me. So I got some stuff off the top, and it was a box, a stone box. Well, I looked up, and I saw this plaque above it with dark material there. And it dawned upon me at that point in time that Christ had died right straight above that, because I'd already seen the cross hole in that, and I just passed out for 45 minutes. It's totally sunk. And then later, because I always have to prove something, not necessarily just for myself, but to anybody, whether they believe or don't believe. So we came home and got a colonoscope, which if you don't know what they are, ask a doctor. They're a fiber optic thing that you can look down folks' throats or other areas of the body. And so I drilled a hole in the stone box and put this in, and you can get a little angulation on it. And this was all I saw, the Ark of the Covenant. I have not touched it, but I would, if all else fails.
Then, where you're talking about this being found and being under where Christ died on the cross,
yes,
then you're not talking about the traditional place that when they take you for a
that's right.
Holy Land, that they tell you that.
Well, it's not in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I will say no more on the subject. There's some other people that are a whole lot closer to accuracy. Okay, I did see, yes, sir.
How many feet is it between the place where the Ark of the Covenant is supposed to be and where the crucifixion took place on the crest of Golgotha? And how many feet is it down?
It's roughly 12 feet below the crosshole to the chamber.
12 feet?
Yeah. Now, the crucifixion did not take place on top of that. It took place on Mount Moriah. But the whole city of Jerusalem sits on Mount Moriah. Are you familiar with that? They cut a artificial moat, made a quarry, and cut a plug of Mount Moriah out so that engines of war could not be rolled up against the north wall of the city. It was against that escarpment that Christ and all the other people that were crucified there were crucified, not on top.
Well, the reason why I asked that question was this, that human body contains about 2 gallons of blood. When Christ died, the circulation ceased, that is, the heart quit pounding, and there was no more circulation. So from that wound in his side, apparently wouldn't be very much blood flowed forth.
Well, it appears to have been his spleen that they pierced. It had to be a large enough chamber that the water and the blood could separate, or the serum and the cells.
What I was thinking, so the amount would have to be quite a large amount before it would penetrate that distance through the rock and down this crack that you're speaking of before it can anoint the ark.
This is true.
In speaking of that to others, a person has to understand that, because it might seem quite fantastic and maybe a figment of the imagination rather than anything solid.
Yeah, that is right. But he was pierced on the side that the spleen was on. And I put people to sleep for surgery. There's a large quantity of blood in the spleen, especially after somebody dies. It relaxes, and the blood cells float to the top, and the serum is heavier, and it's at the bottom. And that's the only chamber other than the heart itself that he could have stuck that spear in, where he would have gotten blood and water and to any amount. Also, there was probably other people crucified above there, but they would not have bled in this manner. Crucifixion is a gruesome thing, but if you have a chance, there's some little books. I have a little red one, and I don't know if you can get it or not, but it's on crucifixions. And that will give you some enlightenment about what we're talking about. But I like that. I like that. These are things that we need to be able to explain to people. Okay.
What about this video that's being put out in Oklahoma that showed all your, the things you talked about this weekend? That was an excellent video. I was surprised that you didn't bring that one.
Well,
that one that you were not supposed to put to the public?
Shall we say he's not supposed to be peddling that. But life is full of things that are not supposed to be. Shall we say he has not kept his word. But I have come to be aware that not a lot of people keep their word. Yes, sir.
The other question I have in mind is the width of the place where the children crossed the Sea of Reeds. Now, was this from this lake? I have an atlas here.
Okay, look at the Gulf of Aqaba.
I have it here.
All right, the middle of it, where it says Nuweiba.
Yes.
Nuweiba.
But I'm thinking where they crossed there was at the Bittern Lake. Was that where they crossed?
No, they crossed at the Gulf of Aqaba.
Then are we going to have to discard the idea that they went down to Mara and Elam and on south to what is supposed to be the Mount of Ararat? According to this idea that you folks have...
The Mount of Sinai.
Mount Sinai, rather, was on the other side of the Gulf of Aqaba.
It is.
Rather than on the peninsula.
That's correct.
Well, you're going to have to change the geographic situation completely.
Yeah.
And also, you're going to have to change the names of these places where they were supposed to have visited. That, the Bible tells us definitely they went to Mara first of all. Now we're going to have to change Mara over onto the other side?
Well, there is one already there. They won't have to change it at all.
How about some of these other places like
They're there.
But they're on the other side, not in the position where these atlases show us now.
They're in Saudi Arabia. Now, we have a person here that's Bill's nephew, and he just left Hendersonville, and guess where he is right now? See, you have people that move from one area to the other in colonizing quite often, took the names of local rivers that they were accustomed to and applied them to others and towns and stuff. This is very common. And that's an excellent point. Good thinking, I appreciate that. But these places are located in Saudi Arabia.
Different area altogether than what we're...
That is correct. Now, what I should go ahead and explain here is if you read in Genesis chapter 46 and 46 and 47, okay? Can you write that down, sir? Because I would like to see you check that out. 46 and 47. In those two chapters, it says that Joseph gave his father
the land of Goshen. He said the best of the land of Goshen. And then a few verses later it says he gave his father the best of the land. He gave him the land of Ramses. All right, now Goshen means built up land. And in Herodotus, the histories of Penguin Classic, why don't you write this down too, somebody, so you'll have that. It states that during the reign of Amasa, who was one of the early Egyptian kings, that all of the land north of Memphis was an inland lake or gulf or whatever you want to call it of the Great Sea. Now there are tons and tons of alluvial soil that get washed down the Nile every year during the inundation, and there's things that are at great depths under that now that were, of course, dwellings and palaces and stuff early on. So all of that got filled in. Now in Egypt, the land passed down through the mother, and all of the land of Egypt, other than this land of Goshen, was hereditary land. It was taken up, settled, and it was passed on to the offspring. But this new land that was built up by directing this silt, the flow of the water, to fill this in, was accrued to the crown. It belonged to Pharaoh. Now, the emperor of Egypt was always known as Ramses, the son or the earthly embodiment of Ra. Now, in the 14th chapter or whatever it is of Exodus, where it tells about them leaving Ramses and encamping at Succoth, it could just as well say they left Goshen and encamped at Succoth. Do you see what I'm saying? Because those two names are interchangeable, and that you will find in the 47th chapter of Genesis that I gave you. So a lot of people think they left a city of Ramses because it says Ramses. But they left the Delta area and encamped in Succoth, which simply means that that was the first time they went into the camping mode, was at Succoth. They left their homes, and at Succoth they got into the camping mode. Now, from some of the wars of Thutmose III, we know where Succoth was, and it's at a point north and east of the northern tip of the Gulf of Suez. Herodotus, H-A-R-I-T-O-D-U-S, and then the histories. All right, so anyway, this, Thutmose III, it shows him bringing back captives from Palestine and Assyria and that area, and crossing a bridge over this ancient canal that used to connect the north end of Suez with the Great Sea. And aerial photography shows that they changed the direction of that canal 3 times to keep up with where the fill or the alluvial soil was filling in this bay. All of that's very visible on an aerial survey of that particular area. So from a point northeast, right at the upper tip of the Gulf of Suez, the Bible says they took the southern route because God didn't want them to have war with the Philistines and get discouraged and come back. So there's only one southern route, and it leads down across the peninsula and hits a wadi system that will turn north and go right up north of Eilat. But when they got there, God said, turn back or aside and camp by the sea. Well, this took them down through Wadi Vitar, or Witar, right down to the seashore. And if you want to read in Patriarchs and Prophets, you will get a bird's eye, very accurate description of the place. Or you can read my stuff and get the same description. But the beach there is quite a wide beach, and there was a fortress to the north that's been there since 18th dynasty and before. To the south, it appears to be open, but you go down there and you go over this rise, and the mountain comes right out into the sea. And so that was where they were stuck. And when Pharaoh came out of the canyon behind them, they were between the big mountain that tears, several hundred feet on the west side of them and in front of them, and the water in Pharaoh. So this was the pickle they were in. Okay.
I don't want to take up time on this.
Let me finish with him just a second here. Go ahead. Clear it up while we're on it.
The distance across the area where they crossed the Sea of Reeds, or the Red Sea, whichever it was, or the Gulf of Aqua, according to this, how far would that be across? Because the Egyptians...
About 10 miles.
10 miles. The Egyptians had 400 chosen chariots, and all the rest of the chariots in Egypt.
600.
So that would make a total of 600.
No, they had 600 chosen chariots.
Yeah, 600.
And all of the chariots of Egypt. Now, we know that Thutmose III, who was the Pharaoh just prior to the one of the Exodus, who was Thutmose IV, had fielded 20,000 chariots in his battle with Mitanni. So when it says all of the chariots of Egypt, there was a bunch of them. Okay, go ahead.
Well, when they got into this opening that was made across the sea, it tells you that every Egyptian that was in that army perished.
Right.
And if each one of those chariots took 20 feet, which a team of horses and a chariot would probably take, you'd have to find it a pretty wide place, and also unless it was so very wide that you could go two abreast.
Yeah.
I don't know how the explanation would be on that if you're explaining to someone.
Well, if you could dive, and I hope to be able to film this, in the canyon coming down to the seashore, there's evidence that the larger stones had been thrown aside. And this was what a highway consisted of back then, was they would throw the rocks out of the way and kind of get the gutters, the real gullies filled up. And so the Israelites had to do this. They had to have some people in front of them to get this stuff out of the way so they could get their wagons through, and their sheep and stuff, so they wouldn't break their legs and break the wagon wheels and all that. All right, now, I can't prove to you that that didn't happen during the 67 war, because the Israelis would have had to have done that to get through there with their tanks and trucks. You follow me? But a mile and a half out in the Gulf and 200 feet down, that road keeps going. It's about a quarter of a mile wide, so they could go through more than two abreast. That blew my mind when I saw that, because that had to be done when the waters were dried up. Just a second, Bob. Is there any more questions?
Is that the deepest part of the crossings? You said 600 feet?
No. Bob checked in some navigational maps and things, and he says it's 3,000 feet out in the very middle there. However, you have a 6% downgrade and upgrade. And to the north, just about a mile and a half, it's 5,000 feet deep. To the south, I think Bob said it was 6,000 feet. And it's a sheer precipice. So the Bible says God prepared his path in the deep and divided the water. So he had to have this causeway across there before he opened the water, or it wouldn't have done them any good. They would have just gone out, looked over a sheer precipice, and then been as stuck as they were to begin with, or worse. Bob, you want to? Oh, okay. Thanks. All right. Yes, sir.
The water, the shoreline there, pretty much as it was then, or?
Well, pretty much. Now, when the Israelis occupied that area, they had a lot of problems with terrorists coming across from Jordan and attacking their outposts. So they blasted the end off of that mountain that came all the way to the water and made a beach down through there so they could run patrols up and down the beach. But I have footage of it before they did that. Now, again, there are two large granite columns of the Phoenician design that mark this spot, one on the west shore and one on the east shore. And there also is an inscription on a white marble shrine that has 12 Jabal El Laws that's dedicated to the mountain of Yahweh by King Solomon. So if you took nothing but that, we can assume that Solomon knew where these things were located. So as soon as we can get all this on film, this is one of the things that I hesitate to do, is present something before I have it totally documented. But I have been asked about these things, and in that case I respond, because, if I'm asked, I have no choice except to tell the location of the Ark of the Covenant, and we won't tell you that. Yes?
Mr. Wyatt, I noticed that you had Dr. Shea involved with you on the Ark of the Noah's Ark. Has he been in any way, have you been in contact with him on these other things you're talking about?
All of them.
What did he say?
He is keeping quiet at my request. He's quite a scholar. He reads most all of the ancient languages, and I'm very grateful to God for his assistance. And I consult with him PRN as needed, but he can keep a confidence, and so consequently he is not saying anything about this. Yeah.
Sure. Is the reason for this confidentiality political or just to prevent vandalism?
All of the above. Yeah. It's in an area. Yes, sir. Was your question?
Two questions. One, in regard to the path going down into the sea, is it not true that the ocean is higher than it used to be?
There's not a lot of evidence of that.
I mean, is that not sea level like it would be out where these graves were?
The Red Sea, the Red Sea seems to be a bit below some of the others. And it's more salty. There's a few little differences. That is a point that's probably very valid. But this mountain would have extended into the water even if it was several feet below where it is now. That's a good point. Thank you.
The other question would be, is it possible that Pharaoh did not realize he was going into the sea?
I would assume he did not. Now, as stubborn as I am, if I'd had happened to me what he had happened to him back in Egypt, I would not have gone out between two walls of water that I could see. And the wind, it says, a strong east wind blew all night and drove back the sea. The wind doesn't drive water back like this. It drives it back in a parabolic configuration. And so from where he came, I would say that time of the night, he didn't see it. But I wasn't there, so I don't know for a fact. Okay.
Did you say you saw the actual hole with the cross?
That's correct.
Yes. Is that a sand soil or is it a hard rock soil?
It's rock.
Well, you see, doesn't inspiration have it that Christ sweat huge drops of blood when he was on the cross?
Yeah.
Well, could that not have cooled up and during the earthquake cracked and went through rocks?
That's another very valid point. Thank you. Yeah, we're told that they cut this hole out in the solid rock, and that is where the hole is. And you all have an opportunity to see that on video or in person. Sir?
What is the reaction of the Israeli government, specifically in terms of what is found at this point? Are they aware of what you found at this point? And then what is their reaction to further investigation?
Well, their attitude towards me is the same as if one of their pet dogs had gone out and accidentally dug up something nice. Further than that, they are thrilled to death to find these things.
Are they waiting on you to...
Yes. The only way they could take over the excavation would be to forcibly enter land that belongs to Great Britain.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we won't elaborate. But there are reasons why they don't jump in there. But should I falter, they probably would. But if they did, it would be a real international problem. Sir?
Yes, I wasn't present possibly when you mentioned about finding Mrs. Watts' tomb. I hadn't read where she was buried.
Mrs. Noah, yes.
Mrs. Noah, that's different. I was surprised, I mentioned while I'm on this subject, I was a little surprised when I read
I wonder if there's a great lesson there for us.
I'm sure there is, right. No doubt about it. Anybody here that has a question and hadn't asked one? Okay, sir.
I'm wondering about how long it took for the Israelites to cross this. There was quite a multitude of people there, wasn't it? Was it a matter of days, or was it just overnight?
Apparently it was all in one night. There were about 3 million of them, so that's, again, this path is at least a quarter of a mile wide. And it says they went out in ranks, you know, when they left Egypt. The word harnessed means in ranks. Now, let me just speculate a little bit. If you had been in the jam they were in before the water opened up, I have a feeling that they went across there at a fairly high rate of speed. So,
did they carry the ark? Well, there had to be so much space between the priests and all that stuff had to be spaced out there.
Shall we say they may have gotten crowded during that little part of the trip. Yeah. I mean, again, I wasn't there, but had I been, I'd been in an awful hurry. Sir?
Question about the ark. Solomon's covering cherubs spread their wings in the place of the ark. The cherub made a covering over the ark and its poles from above. So, in a sense, then these covering cherubs in there are longer than 5 cubits, 2.5 cubits, and possibly even longer with the poles to make room. And I'm wondering, were those cherubs Solomon made fixed, and they put the ark in that? Because the pole, in fact, the poles, it says that could be seen from the holy place to the most holy. You can see the poles sticking past that.
All right, now what Solomon made was not the cherubims that were carried part of the mercy seat. And there's no evidence that they survived the burning of the temple.
These are different cherubs.
Right. Those things would not have fit in this chamber. If they were hidden, they will be somewhere else. Thanks for asking. Yes.
Do you have any concern that there might be some physical danger involved in going into the rocks this is in, such as radiation?
No. What was done to Uzzah and the 50,000 people at, what town was that? They brought the ark to. The Philistines put it on a wagon with the bullocks. There was a town in Israel that they went back to. These people opened the ark up, and 50,000 of them were killed. It was Beth Shan or Beth something. But anyway, that was done by the angels that guarded the ark. It wasn't done by radiation or, something that the ark supplied itself.
Is it not also the case that others had, the Philistines handled the ark, obviously respectfully and toward the last, but I'm sure not so respectfully when they put it in the temple of Dagon and so on. But they were not smitten in that same manner because they were not aware, or they were not.
God's mercy is very, very great, and in spite of what Israel thought, their purpose for being where they were to make the other nations aware of this mercy of God. And instead, it said God said to them, "You have made me to stink in the nostrils of the nations round about you." And that's something that I am concerned about. Do we make God stink in the nostrils of the people that we associate with?
Is not possible that the Lord used us as an example, an object lesson?
I'm sure he did, yes. He may use me as another one, but...
Did he use the Philistines to teach Israel some lessons?
This is true. This is true. You see, if we're going to raise a child and we don't paddle it at appropriate times, we'll wish we had later. And so God had to use some corrective measures against Israel And it said, even speaking of Christ, though he were a son, yet learned he obedience through the things that he suffered. And so, you know, the only difference is God knows exactly when and where to apply the pressure. We don't. In raising our children, if we don't take child guidance and some of those materials and read them carefully, it's a stab in the dark. Saw hand.
Do I understand that you actually saw the ark, or you saw some of the other furnishings of the temple?
Well, I saw a table that at the time I thought was the table of showbread. Later, somebody pointed out to me that in Chronicles, where Solomon built the furnishings for the temple, he made 10 more tables that he put in there. So this may not be the table of showbread from the wilderness, it may be one of the others. But I saw the side of the Ark of the Covenant.
The side?
Some of the scholars around the top, the border of it. I couldn't see, I don't think so, unless the angel's profile is all low. This would not have been part of the mercy seat.
Was there any supernatural light or anything of that nature?
Well, now I had shared this with some people. This sketch I made of Noah's wife's grave marker led to it getting dug up and plundered, right? At the time I found and was trying to photograph the Ark of the Covenant, I would have shared those pictures. I would have, simply because this is not my stuff, it's God's stuff. I have now become aware that you can't just do it indiscriminately. But had I shown that, there are people that would have gotten in there just like they did in Noah's wife's grave and plundered it. You can get the gold out of there through the hole I went in. And I have had, you wouldn't believe how many people say, hey, Wyatt, all you have to do to convince everybody that you really saw something in there is to let me go in and see, and I'll swear to it. And that might be all well and good, but if I wanted somebody to swear that I had seen the ark, I think you're smart enough individuals to know that I could hire as many as I needed to say, oh yeah, I went in the ark, I went in there and saw it where I had with you. See? But until such a time as God indicates otherwise or lets us get through the shaft we're going through, I'm not taking anybody in through any other route. Yes? Well, I assume that the angels are still guarding it. I have no doubt whatsoever that it's still being guarded and that God considers it a sacred object. Now, the sacrificial system has ended, but that was the throne of God for several years. And I doubt seriously that he's going to allow that to be desecrated. Yes, sir, in the back.
What did that other man know when he went in there before you, that the man that you said had supernatural ability?
Well, see, you have to judge things by what they appear to you. The guy's eyes just went totally berserk, and he come ripping out of there, tore his clothes, and I mean, you know, I don't think he'd have done that if there'd been a tiger in there.
He didn't see anything of it.
No, he did not. Whatever it was just a fear. And reading about what happened to some of the armies that came up against Israel, it says there was a great quaking among them, and the fear of the Lord fell upon them, and all of this sort of thing. When I saw that fellow's face and how he came out of the hole, I got a real good picture of what was, being talked about in the other references.
But you didn't feel the same thing?
No, my skin tingled. I got goosebumps and passed out for 45 minutes and things like that, and scared me. Sir.
Are these things that you're describing
showed on the film up there? We went around that, and I did get spooked. So I crawled out, and we had just walked a little distance away from it, and there was this big thud. So we walked back over there, and a big rock had fallen right down where I had been working. And if I had my left, shall we say, I had my anatomy modified considerably. So we haven't worked from that side since that point in time. Okay, let me get this man.
Given the fact that the arc is overlaid with gold, I understand, have you done any radio penetration on the thing at all?
Gold shows up real nicely on radar, and I believe we have it on radar.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And because of that, you would have a difficult time peering beyond that, doing any kind of analytical work.
Well, you wouldn't be able to see the inside of it to any extent. But we have printout of that on radar.
Does it conform with the scriptural size of it?
It's 4.5 feet long, 2.5 feet wide, 2.5 feet high.
Does the radar concur with that?
Sure.
Does the Israeli government know that you have any catalog?
We gave them some objects from the chamber so they would not pull our permit. And those vanished out of the storeroom. And one of the objects they bought back for $500,000. And I gave this personally to the director of antiquities. And later, the whole antiquities department got trashed because of this. And they have a 3-star general that's now the director of antiquities. The people that own the property left. Yeah, there's political reasons why not, but the people started to pull my permit once and said you can't excavate anymore. And the Israeli says, well, you either allow Mr. Wyatt to excavate or we will excavate. So given that choice, they asked me to keep on trucking. Yeah.
If you can't, when you find, actually get in there and you'll bring the ark out, right?
Well, my plan is to, when we get in the chamber, we'll have to clear the debris out. That's going to take some time because we've got to do it carefully. We can't smash anything. And then we will video it, measure everything, sketch it, do all this documentation process, which you have got to do. If you're going to do God's work, you can't be a sloppy archaeologist. So we've got to do it right. Now then, when we get that done, I'll send that out of the country with somebody I can trust, the documentation. And then I will make the owners of the property aware and the British government aware. And at that point in time, they will have to make the decisions unless they defer those decisions to me. Unless I'm impressed to do something else, and so let's say this, I do not steal anything. You cannot, and ask God to help you work. You just can't do that. Well, there's two arks and 2 tables of stone upon which God wrote the law. One of them, he wrote it with his finger on the tables of stone in heaven. The second one he wrote on the tables of stone on Mount Sinai. And so when you read this material, and do you recall when John in Revelation 10 saw the angel that held up this little book of Daniel and said, time shall be no more, that there were 7 thunders. And he started to write down what he learned from these 7 thunders. And the angel said, don't write it. So we are now, right this very minute as I speak, living during the 7 thunders. Now God shielded some of that information for whatever purpose he has. And the inspired record on these things are a little vague. undeniable. They are a little vague. But you see, God could come down, sit just outside of the orbital path of planet Earth, point his finger at the end of our nose, and tell us what his truth was, and we would say, yes, sir. But there would be people there that really wouldn't be converted in their minds and hearts. Do you follow me? So he goes about it in a manner that the people that are saved are honest people, and the ones that are less than that will be lost. And only he knows how to do it. Just say, for example, if you had to stand up here and pick the people that would go to heaven and the ones that wouldn't, I wouldn't want that job. And if I took it, I would do a terrible job. So this is why God is doing these things in a manner that are not totally clear. You have to ask the guidance of the Holy Spirit, and you have to want to learn it for the right motives. See, God doesn't supply us with wisdom to misuse and to go around and strut our stuff, and say, hey, I'm smarter than you are because I know this and you don't. I have an acquaintance that will do something to your car so it won't run. And he thinks he's smarter than you are because he did this. You were out of town in New York or somewhere when he did it, but he's smarter than you are. Somehow I failed to get the point. I don't think he's smart at all. He's rather dumb. But God does not provide any information to exalt any human being, period. And if we want to have information from God, we have got to want it for the right reasons, or otherwise we will not get it.
He's the only one that'll ever be able to read hearts.
That's correct, sir.
Yes. You say that you are going to leave that there, you're going to uncover, as it were, but you're not going to take it away.
Well, we have a nice lid with padlocks on it. Okay, so it's not one of those deals where I just open something up and walk off.
I think you said a while ago that if necessary, you would handle it or whatever.
That's correct.
But in the light of your assisting it, that came out of their terrorist record, I'm wondering if that would be presumption.
Well, if we do it, it's going to be with new gloves, which I carry along just for the occasion when God's ready for it to come out, and very respectfully and prayerfully. And I'll only do it if, if I'm not convinced that God wants it left where it is. So, so far God has helped us. Let me share a little experience with you. I took some people that I trusted over, and we got over this gold wheel that was on the chariot. And we were going to go down and film it because I wanted witnesses. There's another fellow that saw it with me, but his veracity has suffered considerably over the years. So I wanted, a little better verification. And we had two inflatable rafts lashed together, and three of us were ready to jump in. The guy that had the most expensive equipment sprung a leak in his gear. And so I had him get down in the water so I could spot the leak. Well, it turned out it was leaking into his life vest. So he said, you'll have to pull me back in the boat so I can fix it. So I reached down, got him to the harness, pulled him into the boat, flat of his stomach. A 14-foot shark shot right past where he had been. He would have been half a hand if I hadn't pulled him out at that second. I didn't know the shark was coming. Nobody knew it was coming. There were three of those big rascals out there. And try as I might, I could never take these people to that gold wheel. So I do not doubt for 1 minute that when the moment arrives, God will help us understand what he wants done. You see, if I had to know it now, you know, I could just say, sit down and say, well, Lord, if you don't let me know what on earth you're doing with this thing, I'm not going back over there. He'd say, okay, have a nice rest there, Ron, and he'd call somebody else, you know, so. But I'm confident that he'll help us know what to do. Yes?
Mr. Wyatt, if you've said this already, don't again, but I was just wondering what your future plans are and where your priorities will be. There's a number of projects that you're looking into. When will you be going over there again, and which ones are you going to concentrate on?
Well, I'm leaving next week. But we don't have the money to take a dig team next week. I've got to do some negotiating with some governments. I won't say where I'm going. But it is my heartfelt belief that God wants these things documented in the order that He showed me them. So that means that the next thing on the agenda is the pyramid construction, and we have that pretty well finished. Then the Red Sea, and we have that pretty well finished. And then probably the cave at En-Gedi, where the giant remains are. Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia. And then the Ark of the Covenant. However, being, shall we say, impatient, I keep trying the knob on the Ark of the Covenant project. And the minute that I find the door unlocked, I'm going to spring through. And also, see, everybody says, well, hey, just get the Ark of the Covenant, forget about all that other stuff. And that is how I measure who gets to go with me and who doesn't. Because I figure if they want to work for God, they will want to do things in the manner that God wants them done. So I've let my secret check out here. So those of you who want to go help, remember that. Don't tell me to get the Ark first and then the rest.
What does it cost to go?
If you get your ticket far enough in advance, you can get over there for around $1,000 round trip. But then there's a hotel bill. We stay at a very cheap, inexpensive, uncomfortable hotel. So that's not very expensive. The food is not that expensive because we have cooking rights, kitchen rights. And if you stand our cooking, that's not too expensive. Okay, there's a man back here and then you, ma'am.
What research have you done on locating Mount Sinai?
Well, when we found the Red Sea crossing site, the chariot parts and all, then that told us that Sinai was east of there because they went to it after they crossed the Red Sea. Now in Deuteronomy 1:6 or 6:1, it says, when we were in Horeb, God spake to Moses and said, you have dwelt in this mountain long enough. The term in there, and I had Bill Shea do that research for me along with a lot of other stuff, it means enclosed or encircled by. So I got a flight map out and looked east of the crossing site, and there was Jabal El Lawz, which, by the way, even though L-A-W-Z means nut or almond, the original name of the mountain was the Mountain of the Law, in the sense that we know the law. So, you know, and when we went out there, we asked this Bedouin, who was the only person that we had seen for miles, we said, Jabal Musa, Henna? And he says, not Jabal Musa. I said, Jabal El Lawz, Henna? He says, I'm getting my Turkish and Arabic mixed up. He says, Ayyallah, Jabal Musa, Henna. In other words, the mountain of Moses is here. I'd asked him if Jabal El Lawz was there. So that guy knew what that mountain was. And there's all kinds of artifacts out there. It's just like they picked up and moved, except for all that earthquake and wind and stuff that happened when Elijah was in the cave on the mountain. That covered up some dwellings and stuff. But the rest of it is sitting out there. I saw, yes, ma'am.
I just wondered if Three Angels Broadcasting had been over there with you filming any of this.
Yes.
That's what I thought.
along that good. They came over. They wanted to contribute $10,000, and for that they wanted to be able to film it. This is great. They can film better than I can. I said, please keep your $10,000, and I'll call you when I'm in the chamber, and you can film it. They came over. They said, we're going anyway, because we want to do some things in Israel, and that's fine. No problem with that. So when they got over there, they came quoting several Bible texts and saying that God had shown them that the ark was coming out then. Well, we won't mention names. It didn't come out then. And these people are telling folks that Ron Wyatt lied to them, misled them, and took their $10,000. However, I have a contract that says otherwise. Well, and that was a sad situation. It really was. However, since a lot of good, honest people watch that, as soon as we get this documented, we will allow them to show it free, along with everybody else. But they will have to show our video as we repair it. They can make all kinds of comments before or after, but when they show it, it has to be intact.
Ron, who is they? The one that gave it?
Anybody.
The 10,000 though.
I'm glad you didn't hear it. I don't want to start any rumors.
There's a rumor that you're going to be on national television October 27th. Is that true?
This has been postponed. We have been promised some money and have a permit to do some excavating on Noah's Ark, and they want to include this in the 2-hour live special, so it's now bumped back to next summer. Okay. Now, folks, please just pray and ask God to overrule this so His purpose will be accomplished, please. Now, He's going to do it anyway, all right? But you and I need to pray and ask Him to do these things. We are His ambassadors here, and when we request help from Him, then that is a legal, internationally accepted reason for Him to intervene in the affairs of planet Earth, right? We're His subjects first. We can appeal to our Master and our King for help, and He can invade a hostile territory to render help to His subjects. So that makes it legal in all aspects, sir.
You say you're going back over there, but you need money.
This is right, but guess what? God owns the entire universe. Okay? Now, I ask people if the Lord impresses them to help, do it. If you don't, if He doesn't impress you to, don't. Please don't. I'd rather have a nickel given from the heart with conviction than $1 million from other reasons, because God can open doors that will save you $1 million. He excavated Noah's Ark, which would have taken me several years and a lot of money. He did it just in a few seconds.
Are you mentioning what the total figure would be that you need to have to go over there?
Well, we would dearly love to have about $25,000. Is what we would dearly love to have, because once we get in the chamber, it's going to be a long process to clean all this stuff out and do a thorough archaeological documentation. It's not just jump down in the hole, grab something, and jump out. If it were, we could do it for a whole lot less than that. We do have, that's right. It will be deductible. What would be nice is if you put it through your church here, for the simple reason that then I can say that the church in Hendersonville, North Carolina helped us with this. Otherwise, I'll have to just think of all the names I'd have to mention if you do it one check at a time. Oh, okay. Now, there's letters here, but there are these leaflets, and it has my address on it. If you want this book, it's $2.95, and it has my experiences that I got by asking God to give me the privilege of witnessing to people or helping that we mentioned this morning in church. It has those experiences in there. It has the main points on all of the research we've done. They are all in this little book. And I think it would make a real good missionary book because there's nothing in there to offend somebody. Well, don't make it out, just write me. It'll be available in about a month. You can make it out to, right now we're running our stuff through Love One Another. So it's fine, you can make it out to Love One Another. And it's tax deductible. Or you can run it through the church here and it's tax deductible. If you want to do it as a missionary project, but I recommend that you see the book or have Pastor Calloway or somebody that you have confidence in review it, make sure you won't get several of them.
What about the videos?
Videos, the only thing I have that I can let you have at this point in time is a little study on Joseph. You would be well advised to hold off for a while because there will be pirated copies of all this stuff around that you can get probably for nothing. But anyway, we will provide them in a professional format at some point in the near future. Otherwise, you're going to have what you saw here on that last program. I'll be real loud one minute and whispering the next and all of that. Ma'am.
A little while back, last evening, you mentioned that Joseph built the pyramids.
That is correct. The step pyramid. Not the ones at Giza. Right. No, Khufu, he didn't build that. Cheops or Khufu. No. The one in Saqqara.
What import is it out of
Well, there are a lot of people that would, shall we say, fight to stay out of a religious meeting. But they would fight to get in one to find out how the pyramids were built. And the fact that Joseph, the Bible character, built them gives you a perfect lead-in. See, God knows what he's doing, and I guarantee you, I wasn't smart enough to figure out how the pyramids were built. That's part of the stuff he gave me to share. And so, even if I didn't think there was a good reason for it, I still do it. Because he obviously wanted that shared with people. But there are folks that will come see that would not go to anything religious.
As important to the Hebrew religion as the Ark of the Covenant, the showbread, and all this typical thing, why is the Israeli government not interested in funding the archaeological excavation of this?
Because I haven't given them the opportunity. You see, with donations and with funding, you get controlled. And the only control I want is God.
Amen.
And so we are very particular who we take money from. I have been offered $1 million cash just to show somebody where things are. But this has to be presented as God wants it presented. And I make a good living putting people to sleep for surgery, so...
Have they put any pressure on you to give them more access to this?
I live a charmed life. You know, there are people with several PhDs after their name and years of experience in excavating that would give their eye teeth and a lot of money to get to dig where I'm digging, and they can't and I can't. And I'm totally unqualified. Absolutely, thoroughly, and totally unqualified as far as academic things are concerned.
I was interested in how you got into this originally. Did you study archaeology or did you...
Every man is interested in ancient history and archaeology and all of that. Some guy gave me a book, God's Grace and Scholars, when I was 15 years old, and I have been fascinated ever since. So that's how I got into it. And also, there's several things that if living a Christian life and going to heaven is just a story, there's a few things I would like to do besides what I do now. You see what I'm saying? In other words, I want to make sure that I'm not just wasting my time and my one shot at a good time. There's a lot of things I wouldn't do because they're destructive. There's been a few times when I said, hey, I'm just going to give it up. I can't handle this. This is too much. And then I'd say, well, now that I'm not a Christian anymore, what can I do? And I say, well, I can smoke. I say, well, that's stupid. That'll kill you. Well, you can drink. Well, that's stupid. That'll kill you. And when you get through reviewing everything that you can do that you can't do as a Christian, you end up saying, well, I don't want to do any of that anyway. It's stupid. So, and then I think about my dad and mother who's prayed and everything for me, and I say, well, I'll hang in there a little longer. Okay.
Are there any professional archaeologists that are wanting to be involved in this?
Lots of them. And Dr. Shea is a professional archaeologist, and he coaches me, if I need something. So when I said that, shall we say, this is being handled in a very professional manner. Yes?
We're not cutting you off, but someone wants to leave, and there's a yellow Ford LTD blocking someone who wants to leave. And if that's your car, this lady in the back wants to get out, and so you're blocking her. There's been a lot of questions asked Ron a week ago, probably till midnight. But why don't we take about a few more minutes? And I noticed some of the questions are a little getting repetitious. And maybe some of you weren't down here when he's already asked those different questions. But take a few more questions, and then we'll give Ron a break. We certainly appreciate him coming. But if you got a different question that hasn't been covered, maybe we could do that. And then a few more questions, and I think we'll call it quits.
Okay, thanks, Earl. I'll have to give him credit for saving my life here. Okay.
I was just wondering what kind of power, electricity, or I didn't hear no generators going. So what did you use to get the power, like where you were by the Ark?
The Ark of the Covenant.
Right.
Yeah. We plugged in to the electrical outlet that's nearby, to the several electrical outlets that's nearby.
I just wanted to make a comment. You keep saying you're not qualified. I think you are more qualified because you have a teachable spirit and God is your guide.
Amen.
Amen.
Well, my fleshly personality was hoping somebody would say that. Thank you.